When someone comes to mylifeforce.com, the usual flow for us is someone signs up for the Lifeforce membership. It's $129 a month. So we bring together diagnostic testing, functional medicine doctors, health coaches, and a full toolkit that can actually create programs for people to identify what are the biggest opportunities they have with regards to quality of life, as well as the things that'll make sure they're on track to live a long life as well. You mentioned us capitalizing on a couple of trends, which I think is exactly right. We definitely see Lifeforce as a company that's accelerating the shift towards proactive care, and really people wanting to be on the front foot about how they feel and how long they're likely to live, and wanting to invest the time and the money with a trusted partner to do that in the right way.
Awesome. I'm live with Dugal Bain, co-founder and CEO of Lifeforce. It's awesome to have you here today, Dugal.
Hey, John, it's great to be here. I know we've had some good LinkedIn debates around all things longevity and health optimization. So fun to be talking about it in person.
Yes, and semi in person. Next time we're both in a LA region, so next time we'll do in person. You all are in an exciting space. Have some amazing backers and co-founders as well. So you've been riding a couple different waves in terms of working in a part of healthcare that's has traditionally been underserved in a new format such as telehealth. Can you give us a little overview of what you all are up to and sort of what was the primary motivation behind starting Lifeforce?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lifeforce is the first comprehensive membership for proactive health. And what I mean by that is it's a single membership and a single experience that brings together everything someone would need to fully understand what's happening inside their bodies, how that's changing over time, and work with a team of experts and have access to the right interventions to actually do something about it. So we bring together diagnostic testing, functional medicine doctors, health coaches, a digital experience that stitches it all together, and a full toolkit that can actually create programs for people to identify what are the biggest opportunities they have with regards to quality of life, as well as the things that'll make sure they're on track to live a long life as well. So, you mentioned us capitalizing on a couple of trends, which I think is exactly right. We definitely see Lifeforce as a company that's accelerating the shift towards proactive care, and really people wanting to be on the front foot about how they feel and how long they're likely to live, and wanting to invest the time and the money with a trusted partner to do that in the right way.
So tell me a little bit more. Like, where did you come from? How did you decide that this was a problem that you were going to go after? What were you doing before Lifeforce?
Sure. So I've spent most of my career at this point in healthcare technology, and really the theme that lights me up is how do you use technology to open up access to something that would otherwise only be available to folks with a lot of resources or a lot of connections. How do you make that something that can get into many more lives? And so I spent several years working at a business called Included Health, and what we were doing there is using data science to measure the quality of individual doctors, and then making it easy for regular folks to have confidence in the fact that they're seeing a good doctor and that they're avoiding unsafe practice or anyone who's not going to take good care of them. Which is an awesome company, great experience, and they're still doing great things in healthcare navigation and telehealth. But that was still a model that was focused primarily on improving the experience of fixing things when they're broken. And I personally had always tried to manage my own health in a more proactive way. So I toyed with this idea around how could you do a similar thing in terms of building a world-class proactive care experience and make that available at a price point with a level of convenience and a level of efficacy that means you could bring this into hundreds of thousands or millions of lives versus what was previously available, which is very expensive brick and mortar concierge practices that might want to charge you $25,000 or $50,000 to look after you. So that idea had always been something I was chewing on for a few years, and then the kick in the pants to really do something about it actually came for me when I had my first child. And I went through this period of not great health habits, not really feeling like I was showing up how I wanted to. And when I got to a point where I really wanted to understand why was that, what was actually happening inside my body, what can I do about it, it was a really tough consumer experience. I actually couldn't find a solution that approached all of those things in a systemic way. Instead, what I had to do is go out and cobble together a bunch of different things, at-home tests, a PCP visit where the doctor I was speaking to wasn't really interested in a proactive care conversation, and then a bunch of supplements or hormone clinics trying to sell me different bottles of things. So that, I think, was the final straw that broke the camel's back in terms of seeing the opportunity really as a consumer first and foremost and wanting this to exist, but also having real confidence that there was a lot of health motivated adults out there who want to take a similar approach to health if you could just make it easier and more convenient and more affordable.
And I'm curious what you were kind of struggling with health wise, because you look like you're super in shape.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because we see a lot of opportunities with our members that often surprise our members themselves. So we've run many tens of thousands of blood tests at this point, and we see that on average, 24% of the biomarkers we are testing for, on average, 25% of them are out of the optimal range for our members. So we look at 45 different biomarkers. These are things that affect how you feel, how long you're likely to live, different safety measures that are important to understand. And on average, a new member has 25% of those out of optimal range. Even if someone came to us and often identified themselves as a pretty healthy individual who looks after themselves, and I was definitely in that bucket as well. I was a college athlete. I'd spent time, really thinking about my health and felt like I was doing the right things, and yet I had low energy. I had brain fog, and now that I was a father, I just didn't really feel like I had the peace of mind that I knew exactly what was happening and that I was on the right track to live a long time. And sure enough, when I took my first blood test, a few things came out as very clear opportunities. My DHEA was very low, my vitamin D was very low, and my ApoB, which is a really important marker for risk of heart attack and stroke, was very elevated. So, right there, you've got two opportunities to fix pretty straightforward things in DHEA and vitamin D that'll affect quality of life, energy, physical recovery, etc. And then you've got another factor in ApoB that is a direct and very practical aspect of what longevity means, as in reduce your risk of dying prematurely. And I was walking around as someone who looked healthy, thought I was healthy, but actually was in a very high risk category for my risk of heart attack and stroke.
So the average consumer or customer, client, whatever you call them, when they land on LifeForce, they can shop without the membership, or they can see an actual healthcare practitioner. Can you walk us through the flow of what someone might see when they land on the website and how they navigate it?
For sure, for sure. So when someone comes to mylifeforce.com, the usual flow for us is someone signs up for the LifeForce membership. LifeForce membership is $129 a month. Once they become a member, the first thing we do is send a phlebotomist out to their house or their work or wherever it's convenient to do a full blood draw. And they fill out an onboarding survey telling us about health history, goals, where they want to be in 10 years and 20 years. And then a medical doctor on our team looks at all of that information together, the biomarker results, and what we understand about who this human being is and what their lifestyle is like. And we put together a personalized program that includes key results and priorities, and then recommendations to really do something about that over the next 3 months. You jump on a telehealth consult once your results are ready, and our member and our doctor go through the program and the recommendations together. And then coming out of that, we have a LifeForce health coach on the team who's working with our members on anything that's necessary on the behavior change and lifestyle side. And if there's anything in terms of supplements or pharmaceutical therapies, those get sent directly to someone's house as well. And then in 3 months time, we repeat the cycle. So 3 months time, we send a phlebotomist back out, take another sample, you complete another check-in survey, and then we jump on a telehealth consult to really, for the first time in most of our members' lives, have a proper feedback loop around whether or not their program is working. So if we identify an opportunity, we decide we're going to target it, we agree on what the intervention is, and then we come back in 3 months' time and we have a look at whether or not it's working. And based on that, it allows us to sort of continuously tweak and refine your program as we learn more and more about how your body responds to different things. Because John, if you and I, for example, were doing the same tactic to try and improve in a particular area, clearly we're going to have different results in different time horizons. And so the more we learn about that, the more we can personalize the program. So that's the core experience of being a Lifeforce member. You can also come to mylifeforce.com and buy just the diagnostic, just a one-off diagnostic without the ongoing membership, which some people definitely do. But really, the core of the business is the membership that pulls it all together.
Can you remind me how much it costs?
It's $129 a month.
Got it. So 129, and that includes the blood work, the quarterly blood work.
That's right. Yeah. So the 129 covers the phlebotomist, it covers the lab testing, it covers the doctors, it covers the health coaches. So all of the services piece that turn this into a system is covered by the 129. And then anything in terms of physical product that people may decide to include is cost on top of that.
Yeah. I mentioned like the trends that you all are riding, and I think what's interesting about this space as a whole is you hear a lot of um, influencers or health podcasts and folks talking about health span, optimizing health span and lifespan. There's books being written on it, but then the customer comes down to like, where do I actually, the everyday consumer, where do I actually go to get this type of individualized support? And as you mentioned, it was previously pretty fragmented and also a big emphasis on being there in person. So the fact that you all have democratized it in terms of it being an online service is pretty cool. As you went through your own health journey, you mentioned something like ApoB, which folks are talking about more instead of dietary cholesterol as a risk factor for heart disease. What in particular did you do to mitigate the risk that you had around ApoB? And then, what have you learned since about that particular health marker?
It's been really interesting for me as a Lifeforce member to go through a few quarters of really focusing on my risk of heart attack and stroke as a key priority. And I should have said at the start of the call that there's really three pillars that we are focused on helping our members with. One is maintaining the systems that drive quality of life. So effectively, you feel good enough to do the things you love to do. The second is around reducing your risk of dying prematurely from the top five killers. And the third is around moderating your speed of cellular aging. So actually, understanding how quickly you're aging and using the best of medical breakthroughs and science to moderate that. So for me, the second pillar around risk of dying prematurely, and specifically this elevated cholesterol marker ApoB, has been my number one priority for a few quarters. And I started off with that, really trying to address that through purely lifestyle interventions. So I switched my diet to a Mediterranean diet. I increased my zone two cardio. I really tried to moderate sugar in my diet. I let in pretty hard on all the lifestyle side and even things like sleep hygiene as well, to see how much I could move that through lifestyle interventions alone. And there was definitely some improvement there. But after a couple of quarters of doing that, I I sat down or I had my telehealth consult with my Lifeforce doctor, and we had this conversation around how important is this priority for you, for you, Dougal, as a member. How aggressive do you want to be to intervene on it? And I decided, given my health history, given my family's history of heart attack, to be very aggressive on lowering that. So I could have that conversation with my doctor, and then we decided to introduce statin therapy to bring that ApoB down even further. So even though I had made progress and reduced my risk profile, I was still higher than I wanted to be, and that's a very personal decision. Someone else with the same data might be comfortable with where their level was, but again, I had my own personal reasons of wanting to intervene aggressively on that one. So we decided to add a statin therapy to the lifestyle interventions that I was already doing to bring that down even further. So that for me, when people talk about personalized health or what it means to be receiving personalized care, that's an example of the sort of thing it means to me around putting people in choice around how they want to intervene on different things with the right data and the right expertise. And ultimately, it was my decision on how aggressive I wanted to be on that.
So sort of this combination. I thought you were going to talk about supplementation, but you are combining the lifestyle intervention with actual pharmaceutical intervention at times.
Correct. Yeah. So we're a licensed clinic across the whole country. So one of the other key pillars for us is that we believe clinicians should be quarterbacking these programs, and they should be able to pull from a broad toolbox that has supplement therapy or pharmaceutical therapy or lifestyle changes. It's all just different tools in the toolbox. So this sort of distinction around having a, quote unquote wellness company over here in your life and then a clinical company over here just doesn't make any sense to us. We feel like it should be all the same team that understands everything you're doing and can build the program in a much more coherent way.
How do you focus on staffing your team and making sure that you're hiring? How do you hire folks that have that integrated background? Because it's not often that you hear of doctors being trained on nutrition, for example, in medical school. So how do you make sure that folks have both? Are you seeing a growing number of doctors getting trained in both the Western side and then maybe some of the I don't know if it's in Eastern side, but just some of the more functional stuff?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You hit on a trend that I think is really interesting that's playing out on the clinician side in parallel to what's playing out on the consumer side. So just as a lot of people as consumers are starting to want to be much more proactive and take control of their health, we're also seeing a real groundswell in doctors who want to practice this sort of medicine, want to practice functional or integrated medicine, longevity medicine, and haven't been able to do that effectively within the traditional healthcare system, not through any fault of their own, just because of the incentives and the structures in place in the sick care system. So, just as an interesting data point, IFM, which is one of the largest certification bodies for functional medicine, has seen over a 5x increase in certifications over the last 10 years. So the supply is reacting to the consumer demand. And for a company like us, that's great because we have a lot of doctors who want to be practicing with the right data, want to be working with motivated adults, um, and buy into this shift that we're trying to accelerate. So, to be honest, that's probably been a pleasant surprise for me since we launched the company is that I thought we may struggle more than we have to find doctors who are at the grade that we expect, but we actually haven't had that problem at all. We've been, really grateful to have a lot of excellent clinicians with the primary care, internal medicine, family medicine initial certification, and then functional medicine and integrated medicine secondary qualifications on top of that.
Yeah. How has running this company over the last few years operated your perspective on healthcare? And maybe how do you now envision healthcare changing? I've recently this year had my own sort of health hiccups, and have had to go on the journey of finding a specialist in, let's say, the gastro space, or today I did my first allergy test, for example, on my back, which was an interesting experience where they put the environmental things that you might allergens, and then they put the food allergens to test what you might have allergy to. Um, and it's an interesting. It's as you become an adult and start interfacing a little bit more with the healthcare system. There's things that are great, and there's things that are not so great. And I'm curious, running a healthcare company that is very forward thinking, how it has impacted your view on this whole complicated and complex system that we have.
Yeah, I think it's easy to bag on the existing healthcare system, and I've definitely had my moments of being a bit jaded about that in the past. But I think we should also recognize that in terms of understanding how to diagnose and treat things when they're broken, the US healthcare system often does an excellent job. Not always, but often does an excellent job. But what we've seen sort of outside that scenario where you know something's broken and you want to fix it is a really interesting dislocation in anything to do with preventative or proactive care. So, primary care is a great example and a good place to look for evidence of this. When you ask people, particularly people under the age of, say, 50 years old, how many people have a regular primary care clinician? Very few people have that relationship anymore. And we've actually seen primary care really sort of collapse into urgent care, meaning that people are really using primary care for very transactional interactions to fix very simple things when they're broken. And I think that trend will continue personally. I think we're going to see this sort of polarization of how people use healthcare more towards very transactional urgent care type interactions and then specialist care when something's broken. And so what that leaves in the middle is this massive white space around who is the continuous relationship in your life that is working actively to keep you healthy. Like if you're not actually someone who's walking around with an active chronic disease or injury, the alternative shouldn't be just do nothing. Like there's an active practice that we should all be engaging in if you're health motivated. But where do people turn to actually find that solution at the moment? That's the opportunity that I'm excited about personally, and obviously that we as a company are running at with Lifeforce, because I think that you'll continue to see that push towards the edges of specialist care that's very effective but very narrow, and then urgent care that's very transactional but very convenient, and this huge space in the middle for something that is a new type of continuous relationship.
That's interesting. Do you foresee a future where your health force membership is covered by insurance?
We do. One of the other things I should have mentioned is that I am optimistic around how value-based care arrangements will start to change the incentives, the structural incentives in healthcare at large. I think we are close to a tipping point where there's more incentives for healthcare payers, whether that's insurers or employers, to get behind things that actually save money over, even if it's money saved over a longer time horizon than they care about in a fee-for-service environment. So yes, I do think that change will play out. I do think companies like us and other folks working on proactive care will be part of that story, and it's definitely something we're going to be chipping away at over the next couple of years.
Super cool. You all have collaborated with notable figures like Tony Robbins and Dr. Peter Diamandis. Can you talk through those relationships and how they've influenced Lifeforce's direction? I remember Tony Robbins was one of the original guys talking about cold water exposure, and now it's everywhere. So I wonder if there's parts of the like healthcare model that he's also like where he was early on, and now you're seeing a proliferation of.
Yeah, for sure. So when we founded Lifeforce, it was really a combination, a group of people coming together from many different stages of life and slightly different angles, but all sort of excited by this opportunity of opening up access to proactive care. And Tony Robbins and Dr. Peter Diamandis are co-founders of the company and have been fantastic thought partners and supporters in getting the word out and helping us to grow the brand and refine the product in the history of the company. Tony and Peter have been power users of these sorts of programs and these sorts of interventions for a long time. So in some ways, what we're trying to do is take a lot of the things that they've benefited from personally and make them available to many more people. And Tony himself sees this as really a service to his community that he hasn't been able to bring to them before. Meaning, he spent 40 years of his life talking about how to improve your life through new mental models, new emotional and psychological tools. But up until we launched Lifeforce, he hadn't done anything on the health side, and that felt like a big gap for him. So him launching Lifeforce with us was part of him closing that gap, and I think it's part of his legacy to make sure that the folks in his community have access to something like this as well. And then Dr. Peter Diamandis is you're one of the leading thought leaders in exponential technology, the future of medical science. So in terms of keeping us plugged into what's coming down the pike and how can we make sure that we are on the leading edge of that, he's been a great connector for us.
Working in and around this space, I'm curious what have you changed your mind on when it comes to health? Since we spoke at the top of the call, a lot of people's ideas on health evolve and change as we evolve and change as people and as the science catches up. And I'm curious how that has played out for you as a leader of this company.
Yeah. I think one change for me has been this realization that for most people who want to feel better and live longer, it's actually a case of doing less, but doing those few things well. And what I mean by that is we often work with members who are doing a lot of stuff in terms of spending a lot of money or spending a lot of time or have been bouncing around different solutions to do with health and wellness or longevity and health optimization. but not really doing it in any sort of focused way that's, really lays it in on the top priorities for them, because they haven't really had a way to identify with confidence, here are the two things you should be focused on for the next 3 months. So I think over time with Life Force, I've just become more and more convinced that simplicity and prioritization is one of the biggest services that we can provide for our members. So, really cutting through the noise and helping people understand you probably don't need to be taking 8 different supplements. You probably don't need to have 4 different apps on your phone. Let's just use real data to cut through this and systematically knock off the things that are going to help you feel better and live longer. And I think by doing that, you actually see much better results versus, folks often themselves being a bit schizophrenic in jumping around with the different things that they're doing. And I know that some people do that for fun. It's like a pastime or tourism. I totally get that. But a lot of people do it because they just don't know how else to do it. And so one of the gaps we're trying to fill is, be that trusted partner. So you don't have to be going out trying to research supplement ingredients. You just find a partner like us to work with, and we'll do that for you. And so you can avoid this phenomenon where it's like, you're worried about changing the tires on your car, but actually your radiator's broken. Like, that's the sort of conversation we often have with people around, let's start with the fundamentals and the things that are most important, and then from there we can, tackle other things along the way.
Yeah, there's some level of health that I think is like personal experimentation, but I think what I'm hearing is that can also get out of hand. And if you have the right partners on your side, then you can focus on the right things and waste less time and waste less money, and really be focused with what you're trying to optimize for, and do it in a focused manner. Where do you find that people are still getting stuck? I find it interesting that, we have health coaches, we have all the information at our fingertips. There's personal trainers. There's so many types of videos about the best types of food to eat. The list goes on and on. But when push comes to shove, like, human behavior still creates its own level of friction when trying to make lifestyle change. And I'm curious where you're seeing people get stuck along the way.
Certainly, certainly, nutrition and movement are always going to be places where people are going to need to be really focused to maintain good practices there. So, we all, myself included, have our guilty pleasures in terms of, diet, and, sometimes find it hard to push ourselves on exercise as much as we want to. So I do think there's just a gravity about human nature that you're always pushing against. But one of the things that we found helps a lot in that, and I think there's a lot of good behavior change research to back this up, is really trying to connect those lifestyle changes through to some deeper meaning or purpose that is very motivating for people at an intrinsic level is important. And that actually takes real conversations and real discovery. It's not even necessarily the first thing that someone identifies. When someone comes to us, the number one reason, because of course we're collecting all this information every 3 months. The number one reason people come to us initially is energy and vitality. This sense that, as I get older, as I pass 30 or 35 or whatever it is, I feel like I don't have the drive and the energy that I want to have. And that's an interesting insight on its own. But actually, if you have a conversation with someone and understand, vitality so you can do what, or energy so that you can do what, like bring this to life for us. Is it spending time with your kids? Is it completing the book that you've been trying to write for 5 years and haven't been able to do? Like, what is that end state that you really care about, that you can continue to go back to when times get tough on behavior change, and that we, as your partner, can continue to kind of remind you of when we feel like you need a little bit of boost and motivation. Um, so I think it's easy to get lost in the biomarkers and the, clinical condition, this and that. But like, effectively, why people are coming to us is because they want a certain type of life, and understanding what that life is and weaving that into the programs and the conversation has been really effective.
It sounds, as you talking about that a lot of that is also related to mental and emotional health. And I wonder if you all plan to get into that space as well, and if not, how a Life Force team might advise someone in that realm of their well-being.
When you think about the name, Life Force, and what would go into that, it really just speaks to helping people enjoy a life well lived, and mental and spiritual contentment and health is a huge piece of that for sure. So we will do something there. It's TBD whether we'll do something directly or whether we'll do something in partnership, because the vision for us is either through directly delivering something or through having a partnership set up with someone else who can do this well, we can navigate people to the type of support they need in this whole area of proactive health. So that will be something that we help people with for sure. We're working on whether or not that's something that's best to have in the platform ourselves, or something we could do with a great partner. We also understand, to be scalable and to build the sort of business we want, we can't spread ourselves too thin. So that's always a balance.
Cool. You mentioned ApoB. I'm wondering if there are a couple other biomarkers you're seeing a big group of patients focus on, and at a high level, the types of interventions that you're seeing in those spaces.
Absolutely. So we can talk about a couple. One is really related to that second pillar of risk of dying prematurely, and it's not a super sexy biomarker. It's HbA1c, which everyone's probably had tested at some point to understand risk of diabetes. But what's interesting for us when we look at our population is that 26% of people who come to us as new members are pre-diabetic. So you think about that as a population that probably skews as self-identifying to be, more healthy than the US population. You're still seeing 26% of people who are pre-diabetic. And we know that within 3 years, 30% of that 26% will actually go on to become diabetic. So that's a huge group of people who are walking around health motivated, but at risk of becoming diabetic within 3 years. And most of the time when we have that conversation, that's a complete surprise for people. So, depending on the individual, depending on their lifestyle, their genetics, et cetera, we'll address that from multiple angles: movement, nutrition, pharmaceutical therapy if we need to. Again, it really comes back to their level of risk appetite, their level of concern around that, and how they want to attack it.
Mm. How about hormones? When I initially heard of Life Force, I think it did you have more of a focus on hormones in the past, or maybe that's just the way I heard about it.
We do provide full hormone optimization for men and women. So testosterone, estrogen, thyroid. We think hormones are a super important part of understanding what's changing in your body, and particularly on the quality of life side, understanding why you feel the way you do. But we also think that it's not without its risks, and it's important to do that the right way with the right team. So that was actually the other biomarker I was going to talk about. When we looked at our population, we saw that 90% of people, which I had to get our team to double check, but 90% of people that came to us were suboptimal in at least one of those hormones that I mentioned: thyroid, estrogen, or testosterone. So from a quality of life perspective, that's a massive opportunity in a place we're often helping people. But there's different ways to help with hormone balance. Some of them are actual bioidentical hormone therapies for sure, but there's also plenty of things on the lifestyle side that can make a significant difference for people's hormone balance. So, we like to understand where people are at in terms of age, lifestyle, what their goals are, and then we can put together a hormone protocol for them.
This might be getting too deep in the weeds, but I also like to nerd out on this stuff. So let's just say something like testosterone. Where does your understanding or Life Force's understanding of what is an optimal range or suboptimal range come from when Western medicine, your standard doctor's office will have a different type of range in terms of what's ideal?
Yeah. Yeah. So this doesn't just apply to hormones, this applies for all the biomarkers we're looking at. We are Our goal is to move people into the optimal range where people feel their best, or where they have the best risk adjusted life expectancy. So hormones are exactly the same. The reference range that comes back from a standard lab result, as you know, is just based on standard deviations of the mean for the whole population. And it's not helpful if you're someone who wants to be striving for more than average in these things. So our medical director, our clinical advisory board take the lead in defining the optimal range. That's based on research. It's based on empirical experience from them themselves and their practice, and it's also based on what certain medical associations deem as the optimal range. So our goal is to help people understand, really how to interpret results, and uh, not settle for just being told that everything's fine, but actually, demand more, and demand to have a way to move themselves into the optimal range.
Very cool. Um, Dougal, what else are you doing personally? I always like to get into that a little bit. As like, what else are you doing personally to optimize your health outside of what we've talked about so far?
Sure. So my protocol at the moment, starting on the supplement side, is I'm taking a DHEA supplement, I'm taking a vitamin D supplement, I'm taking some omegas, and I'm also taking a sort of a generalist longevity supplement called Peak Health Span. Um, and so most of those things were directly pulling from my biomarker results on my last blood test. And then outside of that, I typically fast every morning. So I typically do an 8-16 fast. I found that just helps with keeping my weight where I want to. Um, but it's obviously a challenge to make sure I get enough protein doing that. I'll usually do some hot cold therapy once or twice a week, so a cold plunge or a sauna. And then otherwise, I'm trying to get in 45 to 60 minutes of exercise every day. I've got two small kids, so it's not always easy, and it's not always pleasant to get the sort of intensity I want from that. But at a minimum, I try to at least get out and move for 45 minutes a day.
Super cool. What other questions should I ask you that I haven't yet, Dougal?
I think an interesting question is sort of, who is Lifeforce right for? That's a question we often get. And the way I think about this is, primarily adults over the age of 30 who are health motivated, but doesn't necessarily mean they're already healthy. And I think that's like an important thing to call out, because sometimes there can be a misconception that, we're building something for biohackers or, prosumers in this space. And really that's, although we have plenty of folks who are members who would fit into those categories, really the thing we're more excited about is to work with people who've just made the decision that they want to be healthier from whatever the starting point is. And so, I think psychographically, the way this shows up is generally people who come to us are living with intent, meaning they have aspirations for the future. They know what sort of lifestyle they want to achieve. And it doesn't mean they're already in good shape or they already have done a bunch of stuff in this sort of category. All it means is that they're willing to, to get on the front foot. And once someone has made that shift mentally, then, we're waiting and ready to get on the journey with them.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up because I was going to ask a little bit about that. So you said over 30, someone that is wants to be healthier, is health motivated, but maybe not healthy in the state that they'd like to see themselves yet. Um, I know for some, the price tag of paying over $100 a month, in addition to, let's say, you pay your health insurance premiums out of pocket, can get quite expensive. And what would you say to people who may not have a budget for something like Lifeforce yet, but want to get on the path of health optimization? Like where would you start if you didn't have Lifeforce, and how would you think about that journey?
Yeah, I think there are some universal truths around things you can do that you don't need to have, specific biomarker results to be confident that you're going to get good results from. And we've touched on several of them already, but you're understanding your nutrition, at least at a macros level, of how many calories you're taking in, how many you're burning, and being intentional about that and having some self control around that. That's something we know that everyone would benefit from doing. Likewise, on the exercise front, I think it's easy to get lost in the weeds around specific workout programs, or zone 2 versus zone 4 versus whatever. But the most important principle is, go out, move, push yourself, do that regularly several times a week. So that's not always easy, but it's definitely something that you can do with relatively little expense. And then I do think getting at least a decent blood panel at some point as a starting baseline is going to allow you to take that to the next level, and you can increasingly do that at a much better price point than what you'd be able to do even 5 years ago. So I think it's great that that sort of, the testing side of it is coming down and down and down in price. And so finding a way to have the resources to do at least a baseline test, and then directionally you'll know what you should be focusing on. I think that'd be a great place to start.
Great. Yeah. And I would recommend, I've recently been reading it. It gets a little bit in the weeds, but Outlive by Peter Attia as a great, you mentioned some of the things of like, you know, avoiding premature death. He calls them the four horsemen around, heart disease, neurological disease, or neurodegenerative disease, cancer, and diabetes, and the different blood markers and things to take a look at. And you don't have to spend a ton of money on a blood panel in order to take a look at some of those biomarkers and see if there's anything specific that puts you at risk.
I think that's right, and I think his work's about as best in the business. So I read the book as well, and loved it. And that does actually bring up another thing that's worth calling out: educating yourself and then going in and having a different sort of conversation with your primary care doctor is also a great place to start. That can often be lower cost, and it's not always a comfortable conversation. It might take some persistence, but feeling like you have the right to have this sort of conversation, and if your doctor's not willing to have that with you, find another doctor that is. That's definitely something I would encourage everyone to think about.
Perfect. Dougal, if you have a couple more minutes, I'd love to do just some rapid fires, just so folks can get a little bit of a holistic understanding of who you are as a person.
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. What's a book that you've recommended the most or has left a lasting impact on you?
Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, it's an amazing book. Favorite CPG product at like a Trader Joe's or a Whole Foods that's always stocked in your pantry?
Garden of Life protein, lightly sweet. I think it's called Garden of Life Meal, MEAL, lightly sweet. That's my go-to.
So is it plant-based protein?
It is, yeah.
I need a good plant-based protein, so I appreciate the recommendation. Product or purchase under $200 that's provided the most value to your health.
Good question. Under $200. I think a weight vest. So I bought a weight vest recently, and it meant that I can go out on long walks or hikes nearby and get myself into a totally different zone of exercise. And I think having that has motivated me to go and do that more often. That's been a good thing for my health.
Nice. Which one did you go with? Just one on Amazon?
I can't remember the brand. I'll have to look it up and get back to you.
Okay, cool. Signature dish or favorite thing to cook?
I actually, being Australian, I'm very proud of our breakfast culture. And so an avocado toast with cheesy scrambled eggs, a few chili flakes, some olive oil on the top, a nice brown bread. That's my go-to for the family a couple of mornings a week.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see the amount of Australians who are moving to LA, or maybe everywhere, and bringing the Aussie brekkie vibes.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah. What's one thing you're grateful for today?
Right at this moment, it may sound a little bit cheesy, but I'm just grateful that I have a job where I can have these conversations that I want to be having anyhow, and that I, do have outside of work. But I can, get paid for it. I can work on something that I care about. It's a really privileged position to be able to work on something you love to do. So, right now, coming out of this chat with you, that's what I'm very grateful for.
Thank you. Best piece of advice you've ever received?
I'm not sure if it's the best ever, but there's one top of mind for me at the moment. I saw a piece of wisdom shared by someone on my LinkedIn talking about how they spent their 20s worrying about what other people think. They spent their 30s worrying about what they think, and then they spent their 40s realizing that no one was even thinking about them in the first place. And I think that's just a nice reality check for all of us. That generally speaking, nothing's as big a deal as it seems, positive and negative. So I find that pretty liberating just to go out and have some swings at things.
Who do you look up to and why?
The person who comes to mind first is actually an old boss of mine called Andrew Blum. He's the CEO and managing partner of a consulting firm called Trium. But he's a really interesting guy. He's an ex-Marine who then went into management consulting and who then went really deep into personal growth in all different disciplines. And so, he taught me a lot at a really formative age around how to sort of have a hopefully a positive masculinity, how to take myself on in ways that I think everyone should, and how to continue that practice of understanding. We've all got strengths, we've all got weaknesses, but you've got to be working on yourself. I often think back at that time spent with him and have a lot to thank him for.
Cool. Favorite podcasts or favorite recent podcast or podcast episodes, any that have left a lasting impact on you?
I do like The Drive by Peter Attia. That would, when I'm trucking it across LA a couple of times a week, that'll usually be my go-to. Um, I wouldn't say there's a specific episode that stands out, but I like the rigor around science. I like the ability to cut through all the noise and BS in this space. So I consider that a pretty trusted source of staying up to date.
And speaking of cutting through the noise, your least favorite health fad?
Least favorite health fad. I don't know if you could call this a fad, but I find I have a complex relationship with supplements. Clearly, we recommend supplements, and clearly I think that they can be an awesome tool. But I also think for the most part, people are wasting a lot of money on supplements they don't need or supplements that aren't effective. So big believer on them. If you can see you need it and that you're able to get a particular supplement that does what it says it's going to do. But I also think in general, if people had access to some objective way to evaluate what they're taking, whether they need it, folks would probably end up saving a bunch of money they could be spending on more effective things.
So, like, would you recommend the peak health to me, the peak health span to me, for example? Or would you say I would need to be optimizing something specific in order to take it?
Yeah, I think that would depend on, for sure, your biomarker results, but also what your goals are. Like if you came to us and said, longevity is something that I really care about, meaning I want to be doing whatever I can proactively to kind of give myself a broad-based coverage on anything that could be helping my speed of aging, then you'd be a great candidate for something like peak health span because it lines up with your goal, and we formulated that to be a really potent supplement against that goal. But there's other things where, for example, if I was looking at your magnesium level in our blood test and your magnesium level was fine, just because you've listened to a podcast that says magnesium is great for sleep, we'd be able to show you don't need to be taking that. Like, yes, it's great for sleep, and you're totally fine. So don't worry about that one. Let's focus on something else.
Okay, cool. Dougal, this has been a lot of fun. I'm excited to do it in person, hopefully soon. Anything else you want to leave our listeners with before we sign off today? And where can people learn more about you and Lifeforce?
For sure. So we're at mylifeforce.com, and then we're on social media at Go Lifeforce. I think just hopefully this has been a conversation that have gotten people thinking a little bit differently around what it means to be healthy. And often, it's really surprising when you chew on that question of am I really healthy, even if you might identify as healthy, getting to real confidence around whether or not that's the case is super empowering because then you can do something about it. So, we'd love to help people do that, but whether it's with us or some other way, hopefully this has just gotten people feeling a little bit more proactive around how they're feeling and how long they're going to live.
Amazing. And then, are you active on any social platforms? If people wanted to learn more about you.
I am not super active, but I think you can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn. LinkedIn's the best channel to find me. So if you just search my name, I think I'm the only one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, where does your name come from?
It's Scottish originally.
Scottish. Okay, I've never heard it before.
Yeah, my dad's side of the family has some Scottish blood that he's always been proud of. But we did a 23andMe test, and not as much Scottish blood as he was expecting. So that was a funny discovery.
Amazing. All right. Well, enjoy your family tonight, and appreciate you making the time. It's great to meet you.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks for the chat.
Thanks.